If you stick around in any fandom for long enough, sooner or later you'll encounter a conversation about power levels. These range in form from simple arguments over which of two characters would win in a fight, to more involved affairs that try to measure the power of various characters and how much they match up. The Star Wars community is no stranger to these debates, and if you've been a fan for a while, you've probably heard of a few characters that get touted around as being uber powerful, force sensitive so strong they could have saved or conquered the galaxy single-handedly, or something to that effect. One of these characters is Galen Marek, codenamed Starkiller from The Force Unleashed. But in our opinion, he doesn't deserve that reputation. In this video, we'll be discussing why.
Attention, Sergeant on deck!
Before we get into the thick of things, let's briefly run down who Starkiller was. Born Galen Marek, he was the son of Jedi fugitives Kento and Marley Marek, who hid out on Kashyyyk after Order 66. When Galen was young, his mother was killed by Trandoshan slavers, and his father was killed by Darth Vader. But Vader spared Galen, sensing that he was strong in the Force. Vader kidnapped the young boy, intending to train him as a secret apprentice. Naming the boy Starkiller, Vader planned to use him to kill the Emperor. For years, Starkiller acted as Vader's assassin, hunting down Jedi survivors and dissidents the galaxy over. He killed many formerly prominent Jedi, including Shaak Ti, and he fell in love with an Imperial officer, Juno Eclipse, who was the pilot of his personal ship. To no one's surprise, however, he was betrayed by Vader, and instead of helping his master kill the Emperor, Starkiller ended up helping a group of senators form the Alliance to restore the Republic. He ultimately died in a battle against the Emperor, providing cover for his rebel allies to escape. But Starkiller's story didn't end there. As the Galactic Civil War began, Vader enlisted the Kaminoans to make clones of Marek, hoping to create a more obedient version of his late apprentice. One of the clones, Subject 1138, showed promise, but the imprinted memories of Starkiller made the clone fall in love with Juno Eclipse all over again, which made Vader deem him a failure. But Subject 1138 was still able to escape termination on Kamino. He set off on a quest across the galaxy, trying to find Eclipse. And along the way, he became involved in the Rebel Alliance, just like his predecessor. After Vader captured Eclipse and took her to Kamino, Subject 1138 enlisted the help of the Alliance and led an assault on the clone's birth planet, during which he rescued Eclipse and defeated and captured Vader. This assault on Kamino ended up being the Rebel Alliance's first victory, and the new Starkiller became as much of a hero to the Alliance as his predecessor had been. The ultimate fate of Subject 1138 is unknown. Starkiller, both the original and the clone, was pretty impressive, don't get us wrong. Years of brutal training under Vader honed his Force abilities well, shaping him into a capable Sith assassin. He killed some pretty high-profile characters, most notably Shaak Ti, which is no small feat. That alone doesn't make Starkiller super powerful though. It mostly just shows that he was extremely competent. When people go on about how powerful Starkiller was, they're usually not talking about those achievements, but rather the various shows of raw Force power he performed over the course of The Force Unleashed. In the Force Unleashed games, especially the second, Starkiller displays proficiency with Force Lightning, advanced mind tricks, and Force Fury, which was essentially just Berserker Rage but for Sith. Above all though, he does some pretty wild stuff with telekinesis. He crushes TIE fighters and ATSTs, and in one sequence, the Starkiller clone even manages to telekinetically manipulate an entire Star Destroyer on Cato Neimoidia. These sorts of things are why he's seen as so powerful by a lot of Legends fans, Of course, it should be acknowledged before we move on that The Force Unleashed is a video game, and Star Wars games often play fast and loose with the lore around character abilities to make things more fun. Starkiller can do a lot of cool stuff because it's fun to play as these sorts of ultimate badass characters. This loose relationship with the lore means that the way Star Wars games treat force powers and similar core mechanics should always be taken with a hefty grain of salt. With that said, there's nothing to suggest that any of Starkiller's over-the-top displays were just a matter of game mechanics. He was indeed capable of these sorts of insane feats. Here's the thing though, that doesn't make him special. There's this strange misconception among Star Wars fans that the cooler the telekinetic feats you can perform, the more powerful you are. To address that, let's review a few clips from The Empire Strikes Back.
Do you nothing that I say?
Master, moving stones around is one thing. This is totally different.
No different. Only different in your mind. You must unlearn what you have learned.
I can't. It's too big.
Size matters not. Look at me. Judge me by my size, do you? And where you should not. For my ally is the Force. And a powerful ally it is.
As we discussed in our video on telekinesis, the extent to which Force adepts could use telekinesis, or any Force power for that matter, didn't depend on power. Once a Force sensitive learned how to do something with the Force, the only limit on that power was their imagination and willpower. The difference between telekinetically lifting a rock and a starfighter wasn't a difference of power, but belief. It was about willingness to either surrender yourself to the Force or dominate it, your comprehension of what you wanted to do, and the strength of your belief in your ability to do it. That Starkiller could grab a Star Destroyer with the Force wasn't a display of power, it was a display of willpower and belief. There were no limits on the Force, only one's belief in it. But even then, there's another problem entirely with the discussion surrounding Starkiller's power. It's based on an extremely simplistic view of power levels that just doesn't really reflect how the Star Wars universe, the Force in particular, worked. Power is an extremely subjective concept, and just because a character can do cool things doesn't make them powerful across the board. In the case of Starkiller, he was relatively unfamiliar with a whole lot of important Force techniques, and he had weaknesses that the average Padawan lacked. He could use Force lightning, but he didn't know even the most basic of Force healing arts, which the Jedi taught to children. He could rip a Star Destroyer out of the sky, but he had extremely limited Force precognition, which bothered him, since it made him easier to surprise than most Force users. Even then, Force powers don't necessarily make a character powerful. Consider Darth Nihilus, another character who's often held up as an all-powerful Force god, in this case because he drained the life forces of entire planets worth of living beings through the power of the dark side. But ironically enough, Darth Nihilus is written as an explicit critique of the idea of impressive Force abilities making a character powerful. In Knights of the Old Republic 2, the game Nihilus comes from, Nihilus doesn't just eat plants for fun, he has to consume life, or else the immense dark side power he's gathered to himself will consume him instead. Nihilus's apprentice, Visas Mar, describes him as so strong in the Force that he's not really even a man anymore, but this doesn't make Nihilus powerful. On the contrary, it makes him impotent, a mere shell of a man, enslaved by the dark side. He's completely dependent on his vampiric powers and has no choice but to feed them. In contrast, Mitra Surik, the player character in KOTOR 2, is a Jedi exile who gave up the Force altogether, and this makes her much stronger than Nihilus could ever dream of being. She turned away from power, and that act of strength made her far more powerful than even the Eater of Worlds. Strength and power are matters of perspective. Being able to do cooler things than someone else doesn't make a character more powerful, nor does being able to beat them in a fight. Most characters and most people in the real world are powerful in different ways, some conventional and some not. When it comes to Star Wars and stories in general, picking some arbitrary basis for power and measuring everything against it is a dramatic oversimplification of characters that are usually far more interesting when you consider them as a whole. Starkiller's a cool character, not because he can yeet a Star Destroyer at you. It's not even because he's got a compelling character arc. Obviously, he's cool because he's voiced by Sam Witwer, who you might also know as the voice of Maul in the Clone Wars and Rebels, or as Crashdown in Battlestar Galactica. But anyway, what do you think about Starkiller? Feel free to post your thoughts in the comments below.